Strong.
What's going on, everyone? Between the Dots is back with another excellent episode. It's our trade deadline special. Kicking things off this week, we're going to be going through our buyers and sellers of the trade deadline. We're going to go over our trade bait board. We got our mock trades for you as well this week, and we'll be going over some of the biggest names that possibly could get traded this week. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah,
Doing
doing
good.
good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So we'll kick things off. Just going over first things first, just kind of talking about the news from the past week. So Kijo, the Leafs this past week, a little bit of an eventful week with Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah, that was started off with the 7 wins in a row without Morgan Riley for 5 of them. And then eventually a loss last night. Sheldon Keefe getting thrown out. You don't see that often in the NHL as the coach is getting tossed, but it is funny to see. And was on TSN last night, and I was watching listening to Mike Johnson talk about Sheldon Keefe, and he was just giving it to the ref. And it was understandable because Marner taps the guy's knee and he falls and then gets a penalty, and that kind of put away the game there. I think it was a 2-goal game at that point. If the Leafs find a way to pull a goalie and get one without there being a penalty there to Marner, it's a different game. But it makes you think that you get more mad at the refs when they call something that they think they saw versus them missing a call. I would rather the refs miss a call than call something that they think they saw. What do you guys think about that?
I totally missed that last night, but yeah, I agree. So I would have to loop back and actually watch that play. But so I don't know, folks, if you got a better take on that.
I I would rather him just be consistent with what he's been calling all game. So if he's been calling it tight all game, keep it that way. If he's let some things go, then let it
But it's
go.
not a penalty. It's not calling it tight. It's not a penalty.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. You can't just like, oh, in my peripherals, I think I saw a high stick, so I'm going to call it. Like, yeah, you can't do that. But
I always hated it when they would start to if the ref starts asking the linesman if it was a penalty, that's when you know he really didn't see it and he's lost at that moment. So yeah, I saw I don't know. I think it was Sheldon Keefe's in a bit of a spiral sometimes. I don't know, the past
Yeah,
like
it was.
his post game interviews at times can be a little much.
Yeah, it's kind of like he goes all over the place. But at some point, it's like you like to see. If you're a player, you're like, okay, like I appreciate our coach standing up for us. He's getting tossed. Seems like he saved his money didn't get fined, didn't say anything that was going to lose him a couple bucks at the end of the game. But I don't know. It was kind of frustrating. Obviously, being a Leafs fan, it was brutal for me. But no, I mean, they lost one after winning 7 in a row. It's going to happen. They got Arizona tomorrow. So hopefully they can beat Arizona because they got a pretty bad losing streak. And I think they get the Bruins next, or the Rangers, then the Bruins. So a couple tests for them coming up.
Yeah. Talk about frustrating. At least you're not a Sens fan because we really came crashing back down to earth this week with we lost the last 2 games. Last game against Nashville, we didn't even have a shot in the third period. Sens went just 0 shots in the third. That's just terrible. I think stat said it was the first time in franchise history that had happened. So, I mean, at this point, like I was saying last week, the season's pretty much over unless you go on some crazy run where you're winning like 3 out of every 4 games the rest of the way. And you'd have to be, that'd be pretty hard to believe that to happen. So, Rory, Wings are red hot though.
yeah, they are. I think last night was 6 and laid an absolute beatdown on a desperate Washington team. So that was kind of fun to watch. Um, yeah, they're rolling in a hot division. They got 2 games up on 2 games in hand on Tampa and 3 points up. So you're starting to feel like there's a little bit of a cushion there, but you still can't feel safe ever when you're in a wild card spot. So it was a pretty good night though, with Tampa losing last night as well. But yeah, just for your Sens, folks, it's not as much with like the gap in points. It's the amount of teams that are between Tampa Bay and Ottawa. It's just, there's so much that's out of your control at that point, right?
Oh yeah.
It's like 5 other teams that you have to worry about, as opposed to if the Sens were that first team out of the wild card,
yeah,
and they were 8 points back, it's like, well, it's them or Tampa if they can go on an absolute heater, right? But when you got to worry about 5 other teams, that's when it becomes pretty challenging.
And the fact that Korpisalo can't stop a beach ball either, that doesn't help. So they're still sitting dead last in the Atlantic right now. So that's where things are at with them. In terms of the NHL standings, we'll just kind of go over the NHL standings first here, and then dive into some buyers and sellers of the deadline, and then some mock trades as well too. So in terms of the standings right now, the Atlantic, Florida's sitting in first, Boston's in second, the Leafs are in third, and then the Metropolitan, it's the Rangers in first, they've been red hot. Their winning streak came to an end last week though against Columbus. Carolina in second, Philly in third, and then Detroit and Tampa Bay holding down the final 2 wildcard spots. So out of those teams, are you guys expecting any of them to be buyers at the deadline?
I don't expect Detroit to be buyers, and we'll get into that a little bit later, I guess, when we touch on our teams. But I think that every team has, I think maybe not the Rangers, but every other team, I feel like there are pieces that can, they could fill some holes somewhere.
Yeah.
I think if you're a team like Tampa Bay and the cupboards are kind of bare, you've given away a lot of stuff in the last couple of years to win those cups, obviously, and make those cup runs. Eventually, like, are they going to fall off? Is somebody going to catch them? I don't know. And I know it's only a week, but if you're Tampa Bay and you're in the last spot and you lose 3 in a row this week, does that change your mind? It's tough. I mean, it's hard to be in a playoff spot and not buy, but like the Flyers, they're in a spot, and I don't think they're going to be buyers at the deadline, but sometimes you kind of owe it to your fans to make a move, but I guess we'll see.
And then you get a team like the Devils too that are on the outside looking in, and I keep hearing rumors about how they're going to be buyers at the deadline, so they certainly feel like they can string some wins together. I heard a crazy stat about the Devils the other day. They haven't lost 3 games in a row all year, but they also haven't won 3 games in a row all year. Crazy stat. So, I mean, they've just been mid pretty much all year, floating around that wild card spot, we're just kind of sitting, waiting for them to turn it on and pass Philly for that 3rd spot in the Metro, and it's never happened. So, we'll see if
I remember it was like 4 or 5 episodes ago, we were talking about how congested the standings were at that second wild card, and now it's like a 4 or 5 point gap. It's pretty wide now. But Kijo, I think like for Tampa, I think they owe it. They have to. It's kind of like Detroit when they were fighting to make it like 25 years in a row. I think you gotta just try until you don't, and then once you don't, then you can kind of accept it like, okay, maybe it's time to rebuild. But like they still have the skilled pieces there. I think they have to do something to try and make the playoffs.
I'd be scared to go up against the Tampa, like Kucherov 100%. And oh my gosh, Braden Point in the playoffs. Like the amount of experience that team has in playoff series, that'd be just. I would hate that matchup as anyone going in the playoffs. Just the amount of experience they have. Like I'd almost rather play like a Boston, even though I know Boston's got a lot of experience too, but they kind of had that choke last year, so. Just based on that, I'd almost rather them. So
it's crazy to think too, like if you're if you're gonna play the Lightning in the first round, like we don't know whether they're going to be buyers or sellers. And like you said, Rory, I think they owe it to their fans and their team to do it. But we wouldn't be surprised if they went on and won the cup. It wouldn't surprise any of us. So that just goes to show how good they've been for so long. And yeah, the trade deadline will be interesting for the Lightning.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly have all the pieces to do that with the goaltending, defense, forwards. So it's just a matter of surrounding them with the right players. And I agree. I think this deadline they'll look to be buyers as well. In terms of sellers, this coming trade deadline in the East, we have Columbus, Ottawa, Montreal that are all at the bottom. And you could loop Buffalo in there as well, too, as somebody who could possibly be a seller. There's other teams as well who are potentially looking to deal some players like the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins as well that are not in the playoffs that are looking to possibly deal players. So some big names could be thrown around from those teams as well, like Jake Gensel. So we'll see what happens. We got some mock trades for a few of those guys that we'll go over shortly. In the West, the top three teams in the Central are Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado. And the top three teams in the Pacific are Vancouver, Vegas, Edmonton. Are you guys expecting all those teams to be buyers as well?
Do you think that I don't know if I expect Vancouver to do anything else. Do you think that they would try and make a splash, or they just take that strategy of trying to get their players earlier and get their team kind of solidified a month early?
Yeah, I could see them staying put because they've already made a couple big moves. I keep hearing rumors about Pettersson getting moved though. I feel like
How's that make you feel?
That's gotta be squashed because they're top 5 in the Western
Wow,
Conference.
breaking news, fellas. Breaking news. Just got the update from the Score. Chris Tanev heading to the Dallas Stars.
Oh,
Really?
There we go. Breaking news.
Yep.
So pays to do it.
His move. And that could set the pace for what other teams need to pay for a defenseman as well. I mean, teams have been waiting for Calgary to shake down, and they'll kind of determine the market for everyone. So
Calgary holds all the cards. Yeah. Let's hear the details here.
This is coming from Daily Faceoff's Frank Saravalli. Calgary is getting a second rounder in return, as well as a prospect and an additional conditional pick. So I guess it depends the conditions in the pick here and the prospect, but a second rounder plus is what it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Sweet. It pays to do episodes live. Could deliver breaking news.
That's a surprisingly low amount. I would have thought they would have tried for a first round pick for Tanev. But
maybe that's
if you've waited this long, wait it out a little longer. I think I don't know. You'd think that maybe by next Friday, if you're like, okay, we're only getting a second, we got to go ahead and do it. But I don't know. Yeah, it all depends on the prospects, I guess, or the prospect.
Sometimes teams do that a little bit earlier if they know that they're going to have like a busy trade deadline day. So they still got a Hanifin deal that they need to work out. They still have maybe even other, like Kuzmenko could be on the move as well. So maybe they're just getting ahead of the game with this one. But yeah, Tanev's UFA at the end of this year as well, 34 years old. And that's a big pickup for Dallas. Dallas is going to be solid. They're sitting right now second in the Central, tied for first with Winnipeg.
So if you add Tanev to the Dallas D core, right now we'd be looking at Chris Tanev, Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, Thomas Harley, Yanni Hakanpää, and Ryan Suter.
That's real solid. Real solid. To go along with some of the best forward groups. And Logan Stankoven made his NHL debut this past week. He's been on a bit of a tear so far. A couple points in his second game, and then he scored again in his third, I believe, or he got an assist. So just like a real good team. Be hard to play against.
And with
Ottinger.
Jake Ottinger back there too. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Like, if you have a good goalie, they can take you really far in the playoffs. So adding Chris Tanev to play in front of a good goalie, the Stars are looking pretty good.
Yeah. So there's one of the trade players off the trade board there for you. So if we take a look at our trade board here, We have it up now. So Chris Tanev was actually the first name on the list for our defensemen that were available. And Noah Hannafin as well on that list. Jake Chikrin, Matt Dumba. We have Berggren on there from Detroit. Obviously, his contract's talks kind of stalled. And some other defensemen, some big names as well, still up there that potentially could be moved. Joel Edmondson, Sean Walker. So we'll see how the cookie crumbles, but it's already just begun with Chris Tanev getting moved. And then, yeah, some big name forwards out there as well. Gensel, Buchnevich, Tarasenko, Duclair, who is rumored to the Leafs. We'll get into a few mock trades involving the Leafs today. And then goaltenders as well that are on the block, including Markstrom, UC Saros, Jake Allen even. So lots to dive into today with those players there.
I feel like that's got to be the best goalie market that we've seen in a while. There's some pretty good names for goaltenders on the block.
Yeah.
And some teams that are in desperate need too. LA, New Jersey.
Yep. So we'll dive into all that here. Let's why don't we unpack some of the mock trades right now that we heard earlier this week. So we made a post. Obviously this year we're doing a bit of a trade deadline challenge. If you can guess one of the mock trades correctly, then you can win yourself a Between the Dots mug. So as seen right there, comment your trades below on this YouTube video as well for your chance to win. Obviously, you can't be commenting about the Tanev trade because that just happened. But yeah, in terms of some of the ones that we've already heard so far this year, we heard somebody try to say Tanev to the Leafs for a first-round pick. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We have one for Tanner Pearson to the Lightning for a first-round pick and a second-round pick. What were your takes on that?
I think Muggy's getting a little trigger happy with Tampa Bay unloading like 5 draft picks on Tanner Jeannot last year.
Do they even have any picks left at this point?
I don't think that Tanner Pearson would cost a first, but I mean, yeah, he could be a good depth piece for them.
Yeah, we got Owen Hinch, who commented Will Borgen from Seattle to the Leafs for a first-round pick. Kijo, as a Leafs fan, how would you feel about picking up Will Borgen?
I think it'd be a good ad. However, a first is, I think, a little heavy again. I mean, if we're seeing Tanev not get a first, I think it's going to be tough to see. But if you're a buyer and you see that happens, it might be a buyer's market then. If these teams are selling for less than what we thought they would, could be interesting. But yeah, I think that's a little expensive for me.
Yeah, and some other solid D-man still out there on the block as well too that they could go out and grab. Lots to choose from actually this year in terms of those like depth, solid defensive defensemen. Joel Edmondson being another one. You got a whole list of them. Another one that we heard from Noah, he said Jake Gensel for a first-round pick. This is to the Oilers. Jake Gensel for a first-round pick, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, and a third-round pick. And I kind of liked that one. And McDavid with Gensel and with Draisaitl and with Zach Hyman on that forward group, that could be lethal. So I liked that pick, and I think it's reasonable because Pittsburgh's asking price right now is 2 first-round picks. And in this trade, this mock trade, you have them giving up a first-round pick and a third-round pick along with a young prospect with Dylan Holloway.
Yeah, I like the creativity and the depth of that one.
Mm-hmm.
That would be exciting to see. I was hoping that Tanev would go to the Oilers, speaking of them. Honestly, I thought he would have fit in well there.
Yeah. Yep. So do you think Calgary just didn't want to trade within the conference or division? You think that could have to do with it?
I feel like if you're going into sell mode, and if this means that Hannafin's out and maybe like Mangiapane and maybe Markstrom, you're not even worried about what the Oilers are doing. because you're at the complete other end of that division.
Yeah. So some mock trades there. We'll get into some other big name players that could also be traded at the deadline. So, did you have any other mock trades that you could think of for Gensel if he doesn't kind of go to the Oilers?
I had one for him to the Stars actually. So, but that was before
The
that was
Tanev
obviously
breaking
leading into
news.
this. And now Tana, yeah, like I was thinking about it and I was looking at some of the teams earlier, and Jim Nill's been somewhat quiet, I guess. He's made his first round pick in 2 of the last 3 years. He has all 3 of his first round picks going forward. And Tyler Seguin's week to week right now. Looking at their roster, I'm not really sure if Sam Steele and Mason Marchment are the wingers I would want on my second line necessarily. I think that they have good depth, but I think that they could use a scoring threat on that second line. So I thought that Jake Gensel would have been a good option there. Obviously, that first line is what it is, but to be able to add a little more depth and like another threat on that adds to that first power play unit or second power play unit and then second line, I think that Gensel would have been a really good option there, or Jordan Eberle if they wanted to go with a little bit of a cheaper option. Um, and yeah, I was kind of on a similar level to what that proposal was for him to go to the Oilers. I thought that a first, obviously, you're throwing in a first, and then I thought maybe Ty Dellandrea would serve as like a fresh start. Pittsburgh will take like a younger player that maybe hasn't hit his ceiling yet or hasn't been able to given that potential, and then they have a handful of depth defenders as well in the system. They just drafted Liam Bichel in the first round last year, and then they have Christian Kyrou, who was a point per game in the OHL last year and is doing decently well in the AHL for his first season. So I think another depth prospect there could have been an enticing deal for the Stars.
Mm-hmm. We had one. I like that as well too. That would have been a good deal for the Stars. Getting a high end scorer like that too in their lineup could really add to their team. So we'll see if they're done. Even they could still end up making a deal like that as well too. Obviously, they didn't have to give up a ton to get Tanev there. So one mock trade that we had on our YouTube in our chat here from Kelly was Vetrano to Boston for a second round pick. So this would see Vetrano going back to Boston for a second round pick. What'd you think of that?
Sometimes those smaller moves, like was he actually at the All-Star game this year? Was he the
He
one
was.
from
Yep.
Yeah, like an All-Star, which is good, but I don't think he was in the same category as a lot of the other All-Stars. But maybe one of the smaller moves that actually becomes a big move for the team that gets him, performs well in the playoffs, and like hopefully he would perform well in the playoffs. And yeah, sometimes it's the smaller moves I think that can put a team over the edge.
Mm-hmm. I like that
Wait,
one.
who sent that in?
Kelly.
Yeah, my dad's a big Vetrano fan, so he wants him back in Boston.
Yeah. So I could see it though. I definitely could. I mean, it's where he started was in Boston, and he I like that one for them. If they give up only a second to get a guy like that, the question is like, would maybe Anaheim want more than that? Just try to squeeze out all the value they can out of Vetrano's good season that he's having. He's gonna hit 30 goals for certain this year, so you're getting a 30 goal scorer. That could be a sneaky good pickup. So
Yeah, I think so. I think Hannafin would look good in Boston as well,
yeah.
being a Massachusetts guy as well.
So I had a
But they
mock.
don't have much. They don't have much to give up.
Yeah, and that's the problem is they don't have much to give up. Like, if I'm looking at a potential mock for Hannafin, you're looking at giving up like 20 picks that are in like 2026 is like essentially the next closest first round pick that they have available. So it's and if you're talking multiple first round picks for a guy like Hannafin, he might not be best suited to even go there. Their prospect pool is not very deep in Boston, so they didn't have a first round pick last year. they didn't even have a pick until the third round last year. So really, really, uh, yeah, it'd be tough to work out a trade to go there. I'd be curious to see what that would look like. But do you have any other mock trades involving big name players, Rory?
Uh, I mean, a couple of ideas of players on that board, but I'll let you guys tackle your teams first. I'm curious, like, what your guys' thoughts are, because like I think that Dumba, for example, would be a good fit in Toronto.
Give us a juicy Leafs one, Kijo.
So I got a couple. They're a little bit far fetched, I'll say, but that's okay. The Leafs already have the parade planned, so I'll get into it anyway. I would love to see Kyle Dubas. I don't think we'll make a trade with the Leafs, but if Jake Gensel was to make his way to Toronto, I think we would be moving out. Kyle Dubas is a fan of Nick Robertson. I think maybe if he moves to Pittsburgh, a new start, that could help him out. And then to make some money work, you'd have to get a guy like Calle Yarncroke out. He's making just over $2 million. And then I think you'd obviously have to give up the first round pick. I think the Leafs they don't really want to move Fraser Minton or Easton Cowan. If it comes down to it, maybe to get a guy like Gensel, that would have to happen. But I do think that Nick Robertson could be more valuable than some may think. I know a little smaller. He's had a few injuries, but when he's out there and he's going, like, he's a very fast player. He's got a rocket of a shot, and I think he could do well with a fresh start. And that's not saying he couldn't do well in Toronto, because I think he could turn it on any time now. And yeah, so that's my first one. If the Leafs were to acquire Gensel, I had one for Tanev as well, so that's out the door now. But the other one is Dumba. Yeah, right shot defenseman. Need somebody to play. Like the other night, the Leafs played. Last night, actually, they played with 6 left-handed defensemen.
Wow.
And I think, like, you have to. Sheldon Keefe even mentioned, like, with Liljegren out, that's what they were going to go with. And Jeff O'Neill on the panel, the first intermission, was going on about backhand passes out of your own zone and how it's just, you want to make it on your forehand, because
yeah,
most of the time a backhand pass, like, it is going to work. But if you're not confident in, you can't see it exactly as well as you wish you could, it's going to end up a lot of the time on the other team's stick. And when he said that in the first period, in the second period, John Tavares, I know he's not a defenseman, but a backhand pass in his own end off somebody's skate right to, I think it was William Karlsson, and Vegas scores to go ahead. Like, it's funny when they say it and it actually comes through, but I do think the Leafs need another right shot defenseman, and I'd love to see a guy, Matt Dumba, on an expiring contract, $3.9 million on the cap hit. Maybe Arizona can eat some money there as well, but yeah, and maybe again a guy like Nick Robertson going the other way. It's if you bring in a defenseman, kind of similar to what they did last year with Sandin. If you ship out a guy like Liljegren, I think he's a good defenseman. I still think he would be good in Toronto, but you're going to have to give up some pieces. And obviously for Arizona, they're going to want to keep building. So maybe a guy like Liljegren can have a good fit there as well.
Yeah, that's crazy that they had 6 left-hand defensemen dressed. You rarely see that. Even like playing defense myself growing up, playing your offhand as a defenseman is so different from playing your offhand as a forward, just because of, like, when you're pinching on the blue line, you want to be on your strong side. Even when you're pivoting, if guys go wide on you, if you're on your offhand, you have to bring your stick all the way across your body, and that takes an extra split second. And that can be the difference between, if you're in the NHL, a guy beating you wide versus if you're playing your correct side, your stick's already kind of on that side of your body, so you're right there, already stick on puck kind of thing. So that's crazy. 6, and just in terms of, like, breaking out efficiently, making passes up to the forwards, like you said, you kind of want to avoid going through the middle. So another right-hand shot defenseman is Sean Walker that's potentially available. Kelly also posted this in the YouTube chat for a trade. Sean Walker to Toronto for a second and a third round pick. Rory, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I could see that. Honestly, I don't know much about Sean Walker. Like, I don't really see the hype in him. Like, I would rather Toronto get a guy like Alex Carrier, honestly. Like, I think that what Kyle Dubas did last year, getting Luke Shen and then getting like that um, third line center for just like the depth work, you got all the offense in the world. Get those depth pieces, get the guys that are going to be physical on the back end to just shut it down where in the playoffs, that's what really matters. So yeah, like those are more of the players that I'm interested in for Toronto. I don't know. I feel like that's a tough one to say on a hockey pod, but like I just don't see where all the hype for Sean Walker is because I just haven't like seen him up that much.
I'm surprised nobody's shot up with a trade for a goaltender yet for Toronto. Does Toronto not need a goalie? Like, Kijo, do you have any mock trades involving goaltenders for Toronto?
No, they don't have enough cap space to trade for a goalie that is going to be that much better than Joseph Wall or Samsonov or Martin Jones. I mean, once the playoffs come around, you can take Matt Murray off LTIR because we know the salary cap doesn't count in the playoffs. If you go into the playoffs and you have those four goaltenders who have been NHL caliber goaltenders at one point, and if none of them can help you win the playoffs, then there's like you can't go in with those four goalies and expect all four of them to fail. Like somebody's gotta take over the net in the playoffs.
They can just all rotate games, one every. So that makes up 4 games there if they each get a game. And now what about if you ship out Samsonov? There's $3.5 million that's out the door. So you send off Samsonov and like get a team to eat some salary maybe. Samsonov.
But who's taking Samsonov? I can't think of a team that wants to take on Samsonov.
He's a UFA at the end of the year, which would be helpful, right? Like he's at least if they do take him on, they're not taking him on long term or anything. It's not like you're trading Korpisalo, who's got 4 years left on a deal. So like taking him on for the time being, and maybe you could try to pick up like, I don't know, maybe like if you go big, you could go for a Markstrom or you could go for a UC Saros and try to get the team to retain salary. But again, kind of like your Gensel deal, you'd have to probably give up like an Easton Cowan and a pick along with that to try to make that happen. You get your stud goalie and you don't have to worry about goaltending, or at least you shouldn't have to. And I mean, that could be your blockbuster deal. Like, what would be your thoughts on if they tried to pull something like that?
I mean, I would be all for it. Getting a solid goaltender in. But I just, like I said, I don't think with 4 goalies, yeah, you've shipped one out, so you end up with still 4 because you're bringing one in. I don't think it's going to happen. I wouldn't be upset if they did get a goalie, but I don't think it's going to happen. One guy I do think, though, I was kind of looking at kind of the trade bait list and somebody that may not be talked about that much and maybe could help out a team like the Leafs or the Wings, Rory, you never know. There would have to be some salary taken on from the team that's trading him. However, this 28-year-old winger from the Buffalo Sabres, Victor Olofsson, I think could help out a team like Toronto or Detroit or Edmonton. I think he can play up and down your lineup. At $4.75 million, he's a little expensive, but yeah, if Buffalo gets something in return and eats some of that contract for the rest of the year, I think he could be a sneaky ad at the deadline.
Yeah, he's got really good offense. His name's been thrown around for the better part of a year now. So yeah, that wouldn't be surprising at all. Like he was even benched for periods last year and at the start of this year. I think that Buffalo is probably definitely dangling his name out there.
What do you think the Wings are going to try to pull off this deadline, Rory?
I think, and I hope nothing. We were last week. We were talking about the best fourth lines, and okay, so not saying that the Wings' fourth line is up there, but their fourth line right now is Robbie Fabry, Christian Fischer, and Daniel Sprong. So that fourth line is got a lot of offensive punch. Sprong and Fabry each have over 10 goals this year. I think Sprong is over 15. So that just speaks to the forward depth that Detroit has. And their centermen, Larkin, Compher, and Larkin, Compher, Kopp, like they're not that flashy, but they're really responsible, and that's what you want for a player who's got to play 200 feet. So, from the offensive perspective, I don't want them to add anything. Defensive, they got a ton of defensemen in their system. We were mentioning in the chat the other day, I totally forgot that Justin Hall was even on that team. I think he's out right now. And if there's another injury, they have Simon Edmondson to bring up. I just wouldn't trade for a goalie heading down the stretch. I think that Alex Lyon has been really good for them. And they have Ville Husso, who's just come back from injury as well. So let's see if that can be a good tandem. And even James Reimer, they're going with the 3 goalie rotation right now. He's been playing pretty well as well. It's the only thing that I would do is more of a lateral deal, trading for maybe a younger kind of player. If they take a swing on, I don't think that'll happen, but Capo Caco I see on the trade bait board, or Morgan Frost or a Jack Roslovic. Trying to get the team a little bit younger and getting a player that you're sure who's going to play at least another 5 years, or that you want on that team for another 5 years.
Yeah. Maybe they'll get Kubalik back as a rental.
Well, they're not good enough to their first round picks are still valuable to them.
Yep.
It's not like Tampa and you could just throw those firsts away. They're still valuable to the Wings. So I think that they're just not in a place where it's worth trading that for a rental yet.
Yeah. And you don't want to shake what's kind of rolling too. So they've got a good thing going there. Patty Kane's been looking great lately. He had a big week last week, scoring the OT winner against Chicago. So I do want to talk about the Sens a little bit, because they're going to be huge sellers this deadline. A lot of names rumored, from Jake Chychrun to Tarasenko to Kubalik. And honestly, even Brady Tkachuk somehow came up in rumors this past week as a piece that could be on the move, which blew my mind. I don't know why Ottawa would ever trade that guy. Heart and soul of your team, and kind of the Sens go where Brady Tkachuk goes. So, but it's a bit of an odd position for Steve Staios to be in, being a GM of a team who is supposedly supposed to be coming out of a rebuild, but then you're expected to now be a seller at the deadline, and this team's really accomplished nothing. So it's it's kind of a weird spot to be in. Who do you trust to stay? Who do you ship out? And for me, no one's safe. I'd entertain offers for pretty much anybody except maybe Sanderson and Tkachuk. The way Stützle's played this year, I would entertain an offer, but it would have to be a massive trade, like somebody like a Pedersen or something like that, something crazy. So, but again, I'm not shutting anything down. In terms of a somewhat realistic trade that I'm kind of possibly projecting this year would be Vegas going after a guy like Tarasenko this year, who's a UFA. I could also see Tarasenko sticking around too, because he's kind of fit in really well in that second, third line role on the Sens. So I also could see him sticking around. But I have Tarasenko going to Vegas with 50% retained by the Senators, and they receive in return Brendan Brisson and a third-round pick. So again, kind of a young guy that they're hoping to get. The likelihood out of 10 for that one, I'd say that's a 6 out of 10. So it's possible, but again, the piece that Vegas might not want to part with is Brisson. But I'd be eager to jump on that one if I was the Sens. You get a young quick forward for a guy on an expiring deal. If you get offered a first round pick for Tarasenko from anyone, you take that though, because you just load up on those picks. You can always ship them later.
If this won't happen,
Okay.
but let's just talk about it. If you were to get for Brady Tkachuk, Mitch Marner, and Nick Robertson, would you do that?
Oh, like again, he's one of my untouchables, and me personally, I'm not doing that because I would hate to have to play against Brady Tkachuk and see him in a Leafs uniform. So I would never ever make that trade, and I hope that Steve Stais is a bright enough GM to also never make that trade. So I wouldn't do it personally.
I wouldn't do that either, folks.
Yeah, like the intangibles that Tkachuk brings to the lineup, I'm not making that trade. One guy, so you want to talk like a blockbuster trade though? Erik Karlsson.
Yep, give it to me. Let's hear
Erik
it.
Karlsson to the Sens. He's coming back for Josh Norris and a first round pick from Ottawa. That's my, and I honestly think that's probably not enough, but just like in terms of what Pittsburgh gave up for Karlsson, that's kind of on par with that. They'd be getting a younger, skilled player with Josh Norris, and they'd be getting a first round pick. So that's my blockbuster deal. I don't think that's a deadline deal. The likelihood of that happening out of 10 is about a 1, maybe even less than 1. So that's but I would love to see Karlsson back in a Sens uniform, and honestly, do what it takes to get him back. You're a right-handed shot defenseman. I would move Chychrun for Karlsson in a heartbeat, along with any like picks that they would kind of be interested in. The problem, I think, with the Sens a little bit this year is they've got 3 left-handed defensemen that are all really good, and they don't necessarily know how they fit in with the team as well. Like they got Chabot, left-hand defenseman. They've got Sanderson, left-hand defenseman, and they've got Chychrun, left-handed defenseman. And none of them really know, like Chabot knows his role, leading the power play. Sanderson's kind of filled in that second slot nicely. And Chychrun's just been like a lost puppy out there. He's been like minus 14 over his past like 6 games. It's been crazy how bad he's been. And I think he should potentially be on the move this year, because if I'm Steve Stais, I'm only keeping guys that move the needle for us.
How many? So they each play on their own D pairing, right? So one of them's not getting that many minutes.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's kind of like the Karlsson thing in San Jose with Burns. It's like he's this elite defender that just needs to play 24 minutes a night.
Yeah.
You know, and Chychrun's on that level where he's just that defenseman that needs to play 21 minutes a night.
Yep.
You know, and being hampered like that just doesn't help your play, right? You need to just be on the ice more.
Yep. I would love to see Chychrun coming back for like a good young prospect. Like a couple, one that I had in mind was the Winnipeg Jets, who've been looking for a defenseman, who are kind of actively looking for that kind of a D-man. Chychrun to the Jets for a guy like Rutger McGroarty, and possibly like a late round pick, like a 4th.
You just want him because of his name.
It is a great name, yeah. Like other guys out there could be like Lekaramaki from Vancouver, Callum Ritchie, Colorado, or even Stankoven from Dallas. If you can flip Chychrun for one of those guys, I would do that. And Chychrun's still got a year left on his contract at a very reasonable $4.5 million. So like he's not a bad pickup for a team by all means. Like you could still, I think, get a solid player like that back in return for him. He's just been struggling lately in Ottawa, which is tough. It's a crowded left side for the Sens, and he doesn't necessarily know his role. So Sens are going to be big time sellers this year, and it'll be exciting to see how it all shakes down on March 8th.
So, just a little update on the Tanev trade. The prospect is Artem Grushenkov. Not sure who it is, but that's the prospect going the other way. And I still have not heard the conditions. It's a 2nd round pick and then a conditional 3rd round pick, actually.
So he
Nice.
was the other defender who I was debating mentioning in the Gensel trade. It was either him or the Kairu. Um, but Kairu's just had better numbers, and I thought that a better prospect should have been involved in the Gensel deal. But I've heard good thing. I don't know much about this prospect, but he's playing in the AHL and he's 20 years old. So, I mean, that's a pretty good sign as a defender.
Grushnikov. Sounds like my favorite Russian dessert. Have some Grushnikovs. They'll be they'll be good. So they that's a big trade though. Tanev heading to the Dallas Stars. So you heard it here first. Well, I guess maybe second if you count Frank Saravalli as first, but yeah,
Keejo Friedman tonight.
Joe Friedman. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of, I guess, what's left on the episode today, our trade deadline special, just once again reiterating, comment on this YouTube video, uh, and you can win yourself a mug potentially if you guess the trade correctly in terms of just like getting the player right as well as the teams. If you guess correctly, win yourself a mug. And yeah, it's good to play a little bit of armchair GM every now and then. So be sure to comment, like the video as well. And yeah, other than that, do you guys have any final thoughts on our trade deadline show?
Um, One final stat here from Nick Alberga. Connor Brown and Jacob Markstrom have the same amount of goals, assists, and points this season with 5.
Markstrom. That's not what they're paying him for, but he gets it done. So
5
it,
assists on the year for Markstrom.
I was looking. It would be hard to get a deal for him done as Toronto and get him to retain salary because he does have a few years left. So most likely Calgary's not going to want to retain salary. Um, if they do, it's going to be very minimal. So it's something to consider, something that they'll have to consider as well. But we'll see how it all shakes down. What teams? I mean, Leafs are obviously going to be kind of buyers. Sens are going to be sellers, and Wings, hey, they might stay put. And we'll see how it all shakes down. I'm curious to see what Philly does as well. They're kind of caught in the middle. And then we talked about Tampa potentially owing it to their fan base as well to keep making deals and keep them in a competitive position come playoff time. So that's it'll be interesting to see what all happens. Roy, you got any final thoughts?
I was just reminiscent over last year when it was the entire Eastern Conference trying to scoop up every top player available, right? And we thought that it was just going to be this absolute gauntlet in the East. Um, yeah, I don't know. Give me a couple blockbusters though. Let's let's see things get crazy. So
Yep. Yeah, I want to see Hannafin moved. I want to see Gensel moved. I want to see Buchnevich gone. I want to see all the big names. I want to see the Leafs be active, getting some D man. Maybe like I would love to see them get a goalie personally, but like you said, Kijo, it's might be tough for them to manage that in terms of like what's out there. If there's anything that's actually more a bit better than what they have currently, so it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So
and Iserman is always really sneaky, and so he comes out with these big trades last minute.
yeah,
Um, so always down for a little excitement. And the Anaheim GM came from Detroit as well. So maybe a little hot take. Maybe we see Trevor Zegras getting moved. I don't know. You never know.
you never know. Death, taxes, and Iserman fleecing somebody at the deadline. That's basically what's guaranteed. So, uh, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time on Between the Dots.